Have a seat. Have a seat. Is Mark's travelled over from Slough today? Safe drive is all right in the rain?
M25's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's good on a Saturday afternoon.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I told you that you were sort of in a largely a Millwall area this evening, and you said you thought you'd be sort of safe with that, but you sort of seems okay so far.
I was thinking Millwall, West Ham, Crystal Palace. So I don't know what the
there might be a bit
of a mixture out there, but especially a bit frightened about Millwall.
Yeah, okay.
So,
quite frightened about that. You don't need to say if you're a Millwall fan here. It's absolutely fine if you are. But we'll hear about your story in a minute. But you know, as a Chelsea fan, actually, are there any Chelsea fans here? Let's sort of there we go. Some solidarity. There you go. So you're in safe hands, and there'll be some here, by the way, who maybe aren't into football, and that's fine, because I think as we hear Mark's story, you'll pick up that this is a story that I think has lots to say to all of us. But can we just go back a bit? So Mark and I have met. We met the other week, didn't we? And we chatted. I went round to your house. We had a good old natter, and you lived in Slough for a while. You've been working for BA for 20 years at Heathrow. Yeah. So you've been doing that over there.
Cargo,
yeah. Can we go right back to the beginning? Where did you grow up?
Can I just say, first of all, the music tonight was amazing. Whoever done the music tonight, I just felt. Are you the Fulham fan?
No, he's a Fulham fan.
Right, he's a fan. No, I just made me. I was just talking over there. And I thought I was hearing things. It was like Liquidator, and I was thinking this is like a flashback being at Chelsea.
For those who aren't in, because I wasn't bang on that. That was the Chelsea.
That was what Chelsea Football Club come out to, and I was like, and I was thinking, I'm hearing things. It's Liquidator, and then it was Blue as a colour. So thank you very much to whoever done the music.
Well, we'll find out who was responsible and deal with them later.
I feel very good. And the West Ham supporter did say he wanted to play the Bubbles song, but he didn't play that. So anyway, so I grew up in, my family's from London, West London originally. Slough was an overspill for the Londoners that moved down there. It was like a palace. There was an area in Slough called Britwell. And they all moved down there in the 50s and 60s and grew up in Slough. My mum was from a family of 9, a London family, like I say. My dad was a postman from a working class house. My mum stayed at home with us, done a few cleaning jobs. Just a normal, happy childhood.
It was a happy childhood?
It was a happy childhood, yeah. Grew up, my parents, great parents.
Brothers, sisters?
I've got one brother, another Chelsea supporter as well. So it was instilled in us very young. You know, it was not left to chance. My dad said, "You're going to be Chelsea," and that's it, more or less. So, as dads go, it was you weren't going to be Tottenham, Arsenal, West Ham. It was Chelsea, and that was it.
Okay, and he'd been a Chelsea fan for a while?
He was a Chelsea fan. He'd been, in the so-called glory days when Chelsea were, I'm going back a number of years, obviously, when Chelsea were a really good team, the Peter Osgoods, the 70s and the 60s. And he wasn't involved in the trouble. He was just in fact, Chelsea took over his life so much, my mum would be scared when Chelsea lost because it would ruin her whole weekend. Okay. Because the result would be that much to him, and he kind of instilled that in me.
I'm sure there's no man here who's anything like that.
I don't know. But you could tell his face, if they had lost, it was the household would be very troubled. Yeah.
That's right. So happy childhood growing up, and pick up the story from then. So
when we was very young, my kind of life changed when we was about 4 or 5. My mum, she was from a family of 9, like I say. We never had no dealings with God at all, but at the age of 4, my mum came home one day and she said, "I've become a Christian." Now to a 4 or 5-year-old, it was all alien. What's a Christian? She explained, that I've given my life to Jesus. And with that, she started going to church. My dad wasn't a Christian. He was a good man. He liked to drink. He liked, whatever else. But he wasn't a bad man. But their marriage, kind of went 2 ways then. And we went to Sunday school. So I was brought up in Sunday school. Enjoyed that. But I loved Chelsea as well. And it was like my dad had instilled that in me, as I say. And we begged my dad, "Dad, I want to go to a Chelsea game." Really, I was 7 or 8. "Dad, will you take us?" Bearing in mind, Chelsea weren't the Chelsea like now. They were a very poor team in this. This is the late 70s. The glory team had broken up, and they were very low division. So, 1978, I think it was, first game of the season against Everton. My dad said, I promise you, I'll take you and your brother. So we went up to Stamford Bridge. Now, to me, you know, for those of us of a certain age, football in the 70s, you know, was a lot different than football of now. And I can't believe when I see football of now how much it's changed. But getting out Stamford Bridge and the smells and the police horses and the police dogs, and for an 8-year-old, it was just like, you know, so mesmerising. Got to the ground. It wasn't too bad then. Little scuffles, but not too much trouble. But then as we come out of the ground, there was about a 2-hour. It was so much trouble. Those who have been to Chelsea or know the area, we had to walk from Stamford Bridge, Fulham. We should have gotten at Fulham Broadway, but we had to walk to Earl's Court. Basically, I found out of the Chelsea lads years later what they'd done. They'd ambushed the Everton supporters at Fulham Broadway, and there was a number of injuries. It was quite a bad one. All over the news. Come home, my mum was crying, said, what have you done as a parent? Why have you taken the boys here? They'll never go to football again. But it really scared me. It petrified me. But it was a life-changing moment for me at a young age.
And that's age not...
9 years of age, yeah.
Okay.
It stuck with me. The memories, even to this day, you know, I can still see some of the memories from that, you know, 40 years ago.
Okay, and so you're banned for how long by your mum? And how...
So basically, we went to Brentford. It was just up the road, so is that funny?
Well, so you're banned. You're banned
from Chelsea, but
right.
we went to. There was always a way round it, so my dad would take us up to Brentford, and in fact, there was probably just as much trouble there as there was, but it was never on the news, so we got away with that one. So I went to Brentford for 2-3 seasons. And then there was 1982, there was a big cup game. It was Chelsea versus Liverpool. Chelsea, as I say, were a very mediocre team. We'd had nothing in years. It was our biggest game. The excitement I felt, I couldn't sleep the night before because for a Chelsea supporter, you know, this was massive. And got to the ground. And now I was at an age where, you know, what's football about? I was looking at the way the guys dress, the fashion, the kind of culture of football, and you know, Chelsea was still skinheads at the time, but the Scousers, the Liverpool supporters, they were very casual, good dressers. You know, they were head to toe in designer, and I was thinking, look at these, you know, they're really good dressers, and the kind of whole. I was taking it all in. I went into the ground. And again, for basically those who have been to Chelsea, we called it the way end or the north stand. It was split in half, so you had Liverpool that side, Chelsea that side, which was a terrible mistake because the whole time it was just like running battles again. And I was just watching it. As an 8-year-old, I was scared when Chelsea played Everton. But now as a 12-year-old, I was taking it all in, and I was thinking, you know, I was still scared. I wasn't involved in it in no way, but I was watching it and thinking, this is fascinating. I would maybe want to be a part of this because the guys looked cool. They looked. The football at that time was very. The culture of football and the violence that followed it was very fashionable. So that was my second memory of going to Chelsea, and that one really stuck with me and really was deeply embedded in me. And I think from that day of 12 years of age, if you'd said to me what I wanted to become was a football hooligan. At 12 years of age.
Really?
That's what I wanted to aspire to. Yeah, I wanted to join the gang. I wanted to be involved in it. So that's what I wanted.
Age 12, you're just looking at, mesmerised by it, but wanted to be...
Mesmerised by it all. Mesmerised. I just can't describe it. To me, it was just a fascination. And it wasn't just about the 90 minutes of the football. It was about the whole kind of, like I say, the fashion, the kind of camaraderie, the loyalty amongst the guys of belonging to a gang. I wanted identity, and I lived in Slough. I'd gone to a secondary school that was out of my area, so I didn't really have any friends. I was kind of very lonely. The friends I'd gone to junior and middle school with, they'd left and gone to another school, and I was searching, and for me, I thought that would give me the kind of, you know, the identity and the importance that I was craving.
Had so your mum, she didn't want you to go. She kept taking you to. She kept going to church. Had you kept going to church? What was your sort of link with that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to play football on a Sunday, but my mum wanted me to go to church, so I was at an age where, I couldn't really argue. So I kept going to church. I left church at 15 as soon as I was old enough. I didn't think church was, church to me. I was thinking, at 15 I can, the King's Road at Chelsea, London, I can be up there. Why would I be sitting in a church hall singing Kumbaya, wearing a pair of sandals?
Okay.
That's how that's how
Okay.
Cliff Richard and all these kind of images, Harry Seacombe, I kind of, this is what church was about. It was about old ladies and whatever else. Church was not for me at 15 years of age. I thought I had better places to go.
Down the King's Road.
Down the King's Road, yeah,
Okay.
which was brilliant.
Yeah. And if you take yourself back to age 12, what, saying, it's just a striking thought that a 12-year-old looks out and thinks, what do I want to be? I want to be a football hooligan. Can you identify what it was? That it was the belonging. Was it the violence itself?
It wasn't really the violence. No, the violence scared me at 12, but it was the loyalty. I loved kind of loyalty. I loved the kind of feeling of that gang. When they talk about, the gangs in London now, I can really, because young boys, they want to belong. They want to belong. And the boys I grew up with, you either joined the army or you went into a football gang or you would sell drugs or whatever else. And you kind of had these different avenues. And believe it or not, it was very glamorous at that time. It was very glamorous. The girls liked it. Like I say, it had a whole kind of culture. The football culture at that time, the football casual that they would be termed, was a very popular young working class men from the late 70s, 80s. It was a very popular thing.
I hadn't heard that when we met. I hadn't heard that phrase until you said it. A football casual. That was a fashion thing as much as
it was. So.
Do you want to pick it up then? Take up the story then from age 12, where you want to be a hooligan, to how did that start to happen in your life then?
Well, at 12, obviously, I couldn't really do anything, so I'd go along to the games, but I got to a place, Chelsea were not a good team, and I'd be watching the crowd at that time more than I'd be watching the football, and it just fascinated me. Every week, you're going back to, the early 80s, and there was trouble, literally. It wouldn't be full-scale trouble, but there was always an incident, one way or another, and it would just fascinate me, and I'd end up watching, and I'd be taking it in, but obviously I knew at that age I couldn't. The older I started getting, I left school at 16, I started earning reasonable money. My mum couldn't stop me anymore. My dad he didn't like it, but he would let me go, and I started going to away games, and that was even more fascinating. What I'd seen at home games, it was hardly anything compared to away games. When you've got 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 Chelsea in another town, and what went on there, it was just like even more mesmerising. But I knew at 16 it was going to be very hard to get into this. The Chelsea headhunters, they were called, to get into this gang. There'd just been 2 raids. The first raid, the ringleader, he got 10 years for it. It was just after Heysel and Margaret Thatcher. Then you had the Luton Mill riot. And Margaret Thatcher really wanted to crack down on football. And basically what they were doing was they were sending undercover policemen into the gangs. And Chelsea got done, West Ham got done, a number of London teams and northern teams got done. And Chelsea, I think, got the harshest. And like I say, the ringleader got 10 years. So basically at 16, where you would have been accepted a few years beforehand, the guys were paranoid. Anyone coming into the gang, they were going to be, maybe undercover policemen, the kind of climate that was in. So I kind of had to do a 2-3 years. You would do an apprenticeship in a firm. I kind of had to serve a kind of apprenticeship where you kind of had to prove yourself. So I was just on the outskirts, and I just wanted the older guys to notice me, who I was, and that I would stand with them. But it was a kind of 2-3 year period of just following them around till I was about 18, 19.
And they're checking you out.
They're weighing you up. They're seeing, obviously, if you are, a plainclothes policeman, if you're going to run off, what kind of person you are. And we were young. There was a number of us. We were 17, 18. We were willing to do anything at the time just to be involved.
And what sort of thing were they expecting you to have to do?
Well, they would fight, regularly. And to me, it was a whole new experience. But these guys were hardened guys. They were carrying weapons. They And, you were expected to come up to their level. They'd done prison, they were getting arrested, and it was a whole new world to me. At 17, 18, I was brought up in a good home. I went to a good school, I was a shy boy. I was like, people see me years later and they say, I can't believe you was involved in that. And, so it was just basically following them as they did, they wanted us to do.
What was there a particular moment when you suddenly felt accepted, or?
We played a team, Chelsea were just starting to get to Wembley. I think it was the second time Chelsea had got to Wembley in a long time, and they played Middlesbrough. It was like Ken Bates used to invent these cups. I think it was called the Simod or the Zenith Data Cup. And you just think, we're having a day out at Wembley. But Ken Bates was brilliant because, all supporters love a day at Wembley. But for a hooligan, not only was it for the football, but it was to put ourselves on the map. And Middlesbrough, we kind of underestimated them. They were a northern team. It's a rough town, Middlesbrough. And they came down mob-handed. And there's a pub, I think it's on the North End Road, it's called the Three Kings. Basically, the game was on the Sunday, and we'd met on the Saturday. There was about 20, 25 of the older guys, and there was about 15, 20 of the younger guys. And we were in one pub, they were down there, and the Three Kings is a big pub, and I was thinking, this is not looking good. And someone went down there, they scouted it, and they said there's about 200-300 in there. And I'm not good at maths, but I'm thinking there's 30-40 of us in here. This is not going well. And I'm thinking, these older guys would say, let's go home and watch Match of the Day, and that'd be it. But these guys were saying, and I suddenly noticed a couple of them were carrying black bags, and they suddenly started getting them off their shoulder, unzipping the black bags. And I was still quite naive. I wasn't carrying any weapons. I didn't even know much about weapons. And this was in a time where ammonia was being carried. So ammonia was like a substance you would put in a bottle and you'd spray it in someone's eyes, and obviously it would temporarily blind them, or sadly it could even, I know one guy went blind in the eye because he didn't have it cleaned up. But it would do the job. They had flares, knives, they had every weapon in this bag, and I was thinking, this is madness. And we kind of went up the road. It was about a 400-yard journey to where the pub was, and it was just like half excitement, half fear. I can't describe the feeling, but I knew I was out of my depth. And I can remember even now, the guy picked up, it was like a bin, and he just picked it up, a Chelsea guy, and put it through the window. And I can see this couple, sadly, at the window. They were like, looked like a young couple in love. They were holding hands, and the shock on their faces when this bin went through the window. And with that, it was just like 30, 40 seconds of mayhem. It wasn't a long one, but two guys stood either side of the door at the Three Kings, and they were spraying in ammonia, firing in flares. And you can imagine in a crowded pub on a Saturday night, it was just mayhem. And I was just stood there too fearful to even do anything. And the numbers just overpowered us, and they come out, and they overran us, and we basically run round the corner, and one of our top boys, I stayed with him. I thought, I'm going to stay with him. His name was Tony. And he said, Mark, he said to a few of us, let's go back. And I'm thinking, it's bad enough. There was 200-300 of them then, but now we've annoyed them. I think 8 of them were put in hospital with ammonia and different things. And there were 6 or 8 of us, let's go back. And I'm thinking, this is... and I didn't used to pray in them days, but there would be certain times I would pray. And this was one time I really did pray. And I said, God, get me out of this. But he said, let's go. And we went back. And I thank God, the police were there. A bit of bravado, a bit of jumping up and down. But the police got hold of us. And they moved us on. We went back to the pub. All the Chelsea fellas were fighting each other. You run off, you done that. They were about to start on me as one of the younger ones. And this Tony guy said, Mark's all right. He's done all right tonight. And there was about 15, 16 of us younger guys that night. And 14 of them said, this has gone from like, in a football term, this has gone from like the Vauxhall Conference to the Premier League of violence. We can't take this. We're coming out of it. But for me and my brother went as well. We said, no, we're going to carry on. This is what we were here for. And it wasn't because I was a hard person. It wasn't because I was whatever else. But I knew that I had a loyalty in me. That I would literally die for these guys and for the team of Chelsea, the name of Chelsea.
So it was the loyalty. And at that point, you were drawn in more fully and up the ranks of the
Yeah, that
headhunters?
was it. That was it. That was kind of my kind of entrance into football violence, and that was, I was 18, 19. For the next 6 years, it kind of overtook my life. I would wake up every morning. That was the first thought on my mind. Go to bed of a night time. I would follow Chelsea. I followed England for 4 or 5 years, never missed a game, home or away. I travelled, 20, 30 countries. I never missed a game. I would go to any team that would have me. Obviously, when you went to England games, you made different friends and different teams. You could be fighting with them on a Saturday, and then an England game on a Wednesday, you would laugh and say, oh, you done this, you done that. But I kind of just built up this kind of friendship with a lot of guys, and it was just like an obsession. I just had to have, some people, they're on heroin or cocaine or crack. For me, football and the culture and the violence of it, now I'd started enjoying the violence as well. It just overtaken my life, and nothing, I couldn't even recognise when I look back the person I'd become. I was brought up with good morals. I'd brought up in church. My mum and dad brought me up well. But everything was chucked out of the bag, where once I said we'd never carry weapons. I was carrying a bottle of ammonia. I was carrying a flare gun. And to me, for Chelsea, they had to be number one. My whole mission in life, I'm not talking about football terms, I'm talking about violence terms. There was Tottenham. Never really come into that much contact with me, or only a couple of times, but they were up there. But our main rivals were Tottenham or West Ham. And for me, we all thought they'd come over, taken liberties, we'd put our fists up and they'd come out with knives and everything. So we thought we needed to meet fire with fire. So we would, as a young up-and-coming group, we would carry whatever weapon it took. And the more people that got hurt, sadly to say, the more it pleased me. On the opposition team, that is.
And sorry, that thing about being number one, that's how you thought. We've, not in football terms, we know where we are in the pecking order of hooligans, and we need to go up a notch by beating. Is that the thinking there?
That's it, yeah. To my mind, I thought Chelsea had slipped back a bit, in violence terms I'm talking. A number of the older guys, you can kind of retire, get jailed. And there was a younger group coming up, and I didn't think we instilled the fear that we should instill. And we had a lot of rivalry with Tottenham at that time, and it was getting out of hand. But we kind of, as a young up-and-coming group, set out as a group just to say, whatever means necessary, we will make Chelsea, number one. And I mean any means necessary. We've done prison, whatever else, beatings, carrying weapons. All of us at one point were carrying a weapon, and that just become normal going to football.
When we chatted, you didn't, you've come out of this life of violence, so to go back and talk about it, and you don't want to celebrate what you're involved in, and yet for us, just hearing that movement from that tipping point to suddenly have committed violence and been just doing it regularly. I'm wondering whether you were aware, whether you just got caught up in it, or whether you were thinking, "Gosh, I've crossed a threshold here. There's no going back." Is what happens that tips you from not being violent and just on the edge of the group to, I'm going to do violence and I'm going to drive others to violence as well?
That's a good question. I think what happened was, we were all for not carrying weapons, not having that much violence. But when you had other teams coming over, you, like I say, you'd be fighting with fists and they would turn up with weapons. And it, for me, was like a tit for tat. You didn't want to get found wanting. So if one of our guys got seriously hurt, and I loved it, they were like brothers to me. Yeah. So it kind of forced my hand as to say, this is not going to happen again. If they do turn up, they will be met with fire and more fire. So I remember the first time I carried ammonia, it was always for show. What I would do was I look back and, it's not even funny, but I used to carry the aftershave at the time was Blue Stratos. I don't know if anyone remembers Blue Stratos, but what you could do, you could take the lid off and you could fill it up with ammonia, and I'd carry a Blue Stratos aftershave bottle and a toothbrush, so that if the police ever stopped me, I'd say I'd been out the night before, and I thought it was a very, good thing to do. And I remember the first time I sprayed this in a guy's eyes, and it was like shocking. I remember that night I went home and I couldn't sleep. But then after I'd got over the first threshold of that, and I thought, yeah, this is a way forward, you know, this is a way, this scares people, and the kind of feeling of like, you know, I knew that them guys, that they'd been shook up, the other teams this is, they'd be shook up and they would think twice about coming back to Chelsea. So that undercurrent of like wanting people to feel fear drove me like the person I couldn't even recognise myself.
And it sounds like by this stage, what age are we talking here? This is 18, 19 for about 6 years.
So yeah, I'm talking all my 20s, bearing in mind this is late 80s, 90s. I was a mainly late 80s, 90s football hooligan, and it changed the landscape of football hooliganism at that time.
But it sounds like by this stage you've become quite senior in you know, you're making decisions on this is how we ought to be as
Yeah,
Chelsea.
I mean, you know, you can watch all these programs. I know Football Factory and all these programs they have now, and, you know, obviously some of it's true. But, you know, I just wanted to say what a football hooligan when I was going was. I mean, we had an average of 40 to 60 guys going most weeks. That would be our hardcore. For a cup game or a big, I don't know, rival game, it could go anywhere up to 400 or 500. You know, for a really big game. Mainly working class lads, mainly all had jobs, because to be a football hooligan you had to have money, believe it or not, because you were travelling, you would travel to Newcastle, you know, it's not cheap, you would want to travel on a train, you had to be dressed. So you had money, you had like a big interest in fashion and music. There was when I heard Liquidator tonight, you know, and you kind of had this old, it was a whole culture, football had a whole culture, the hooliganism scene, and there was kind of a moral code. You didn't start on anyone who wore a shirt or a hat or a scarf. So you'd only fight like for likes, casual against casual. And when I was going, from the 80s, it changed from, you know, just mass rucks into quite organised football violence. We would... Late 80s, 90s, the police were cracking down again, and what we would do, we would get a phone number off a Tottenham guy, and we would say, phone him on a Friday night, right, if you want to fight, you can come out, if we were at Chelsea, come out to Parsons Green. 90% of the time it wouldn't come off, but the 10% it did come off. There were no police, and it could, you know, it could be for what we thought was brilliant because we'd organised it. It was out the way, and no one could get near it. It was just like for like football hooligans fighting each other.
Your parents at this stage, you're living at home?
Living at home, devastated, absolutely devastated. My mum prayed for me, you know, running through the theme throughout all this is a praying mother. My dad wasn't a Christian. To him, as long as I didn't sell drugs or become a rapist, there was kind of like a kind of criminal, you know, like what you did and what you didn't do. The violence didn't really bother my dad, you know, as long as I treated them with respect and, you know, so he wasn't really, but my mum was absolutely devastated because she was a Christian woman, brought us up, and she said, this is not what I brought you up to do. And my brother was involved in it as well.
We'll get to a turning point in a minute, but just before that, where did it end? You know, so 6 years of that, in trouble with the police, in and out of that. What was the end point of all of that?
You know, it was I'd done days and hours in police cells, but I'd never really done big time. And the older guys at Chelsea, they'd like to the younger guys to do prison. They believed, bless you, they believed it sorted them out and, you know, give them a kind of toughness. But I never really wanted to go to prison. I thought it was a mug's game for me. And we got caught. There was a friendly. Chelsea wasn't even playing. It was at Reading were playing West Ham, and we'd gone up there as a Chelsea group. This was in the 90s, and because there weren't many police, it was a friendly, and it had really kicked off quite badly. A West Ham guy had got hurt, and basically I went home. You know, we were cock a hoop. We thought this was brilliant. We'd had about 3 affrays that day. They were in the morning, after the game and late at night, and it was just a day of violence because we'd caught the police on the hop. I went home, didn't think no more of it. Friday morning, I was still living at home with my mum and dad. Friday morning, the door come in, and I looked up, and there was about 3 or 4 police in my bedroom, and I thought, what's going on here? And they said, you're coming, you're being done for 3 violent disorders and ABH, and I'm thinking, this is not good. And I didn't come home again for 4 months. They said, to my solicitor told my mum, Mark's looking at 5 to 7 years. Basically, there were 6 of us, and it was a wake-up call to me. I was in Bullingdon. It was 23-hour bang-up. I just couldn't believe, I was like living at home. A hardship for me was having to do the washing up, to having to make a cup of tea or whatever, And suddenly I'm in this prison cell. I'm 23 hours bang up. I remembered about God. I could remember about Sunday school. I could remember the hope of like kind of the Christian walk and what my mum would tell me. And seeing my mum having to come up into visit me in Bullingdon was heartbreaking. She'd be in tears. All of our mums. In fact, as a group of 6 men, we were more scared of our mums than we were the police. It was funny. And our mums, they're 5'2", but we were more scared of them because they would give it to us. But for me, it was a wake-up call. I got out of prison. The case fell down. There was a kind of code of honour amongst the football fraternity that, you didn't grass each other up. The guy who got hurt was more or less paid off and the case was all dropped. So after 4 months, instead of doing 5 to 7 years, I got 4 months on remand, come out, and it done 2 things. One, I didn't want to get involved as much now because I thought the next sentence is going to be really harsh. But 2, I also felt like us 6 felt the police had been after us for a long time, that we felt we were invincible. We felt like we were Teflon Dons, and we went up Chelsea, and like the picture of us were all drinking champagne outside one of the pubs, and the police were on the opposite side of the road, and we just thought we were untouchable. We'd got to a place where we thought, that the other firms can't do this, the police can't do it. We were like untouchable. So it kind of had but I knew deep down that I didn't want to go back to prison because it was not for me, and the next sentence would be a hard one.
Mm. And how do you start to pull yourself out of a group of men who you said they're like your brothers, there's that belonging. So you're saying, I want to pull back from the violence, but you're seeing them, you're going to football every week. They must be saying, come on, Mark, we're off to do this. And how do you pull yourself out of that?
Well, what it was like a 3-year gap again. I kind of come out of prison, and I think I was 26, 27, and there was younger guys coming forward. Whereas football had been 100%. It was like being on a motorway going 90 miles an hour. I kind of went in the slow lane, so I was still going, but I'd kind of slowed down. I thought, why should me and my brother, I said to Gary as well, I said, Gary, don't always put yourself on offer now. There's other guys. We've done our bit for 6, 7 years. But the pull of the gang was so much. I mean, these guys, I didn't know any other friends. I couldn't, the way I dressed, the way I spoke, everything revolved. I didn't have one other friend outside of football. I had work colleagues, but they weren't friends. So these guys you'd literally die for. When you're at Leeds or Middlesbrough or something, there's 10 of you. You really get to find out who you are. So I slowed it down, but I searched in different areas. I was kind of, there was girls now coming along, serious relationships. There was, financial. I looked in jobs and bought my place. There was kind of studied other religions. Basically I was searching, but I still couldn't break football. It was still my number one, but not just the be-all and end-all. So I was gradually pulling away, but couldn't find a way to pull away.
So this period, you're 26, this is jobs, girls, drugs?
Drugs, drugs.
Just
Just everything. I was searching every area, but wherever I searched, nothing gave me any meaning. I thought, even the football didn't give me the meaning I used to now because it was so high profile. The police were literally waiting on you. I'd get out Paddington Station and the police would be there, and it was just so, I couldn't find enjoyment in anything. Or even if I did find enjoyment in something, it would have an expiry date. It would be 4, 5, 6 months, and then I would feel unhappy and lonely and just couldn't find any inner peace.
So let's fast forward a bit then. So you're here as a Christian now. What happened? So what was the turning point?
My mum's prayers, I believe, my mum would belong to a home group, and that they were all elderly ladies, and they would all pray for me, and I believe, their prayers were so important, and never underestimate a parent's prayer. But what happened was, I'd got to 29, I started looking at my life, evaluating it, I'm thinking, where is your life going, Mark? It was Christmas time. I think it was 1998. And Christmas time for me was the most miserable, horrible time. You know, I didn't understand Christmas, the meaning of it. Everyone seemed happy, but I seemed so miserable. It'd come to a place in my life, 6 of my friends, I thank God I escaped it, but they were being put down for an affray with Tottenham. My house got flooded. The girl I was with, I was split up. But the emptiness, the kind of loneliness, I was basically suicidal. I was in my flat. It was Christmas time. It was a week between Christmas. My birthday's on January the 1st, so it was even more depressing because I'm thinking my birthday's coming up. And I was just thinking, where is my life going? Should I end it? What should I do? You know, it's my birthday. I think I was going to be 29 or whatever else. And then I thought, I always used to make deals with God. When I was in a prison cell, when I was in a court or something, I'd say, God, get me out of here and I promise I'll come to church. And I used to make these deals and I'd get out and I never went. No, it was all forgotten. It was just, I'll do it next year, God. And it come, and I thought, why don't I go to church the first Sunday in January? So I said to my mum, my mum was like, you're going to go to church with me? I said, yeah. I said, make sure you pick me up. Come round and pick me up, knock on my door. Come round, knocked on my door, went to church. I thought these people are weird, I'd never known men to hug you before, like come in, the first man, I mean, it seems normal now, but I'd never been hugged. So, when you scored a goal or when, you was doing drugs or whatever, you hugged each other. But these men were sober and they were hugging me. And I was thinking, this is people putting their hands up when they were worshipping. But I thought there's something here. I can't understand it, but I want it. I see my mum, She was such a good role model for Jesus Christ. She never gave me 4,000 Bible verses each day. She just lived Christ and spoke that into me through her love for me and through her love for Jesus. So I went to church for 2-3 months, but I still couldn't break the football scene. It was so strong in me. It was a drug. And I'd come to a place where I knew that I'd kind of tried to pull away, but there was a team, Leicester, coming up, and I hated Leicester. They wasn't a big team, but they'd broken. The first beating I got was from Leicester, and they were called the Baby Faces. I even hated their name, everything about them, and they'd called us a pancake firm because we were always getting turned over. That annoyed me, and I got a phone call. I'm just, trying to live through God, and I'm thinking they're winding me up. But God, let me just have this one last team lesson. Let me just have a swan song. No weapons, no nothing. Let me just have this. And I went to Victoria. A guy had got in contact with me, said, there's going to be 100 of us out, Mark. We're going to sort this once and for all. I said, that sounds good to me. I said, because I'd been trying to keep back. I went up there and I had such hatred. I went out there and my mum said, are you all right? Because I was living back at home. I'd moved out of my flat to move back in, and she knew that something was wrong. I went up there, I caught the train, and I got out of Victoria and I was looking round. We used to meet a number of pubs in Victoria. And I looked in every pub and I couldn't find one guy. To this day, I don't know where they were, the Chelsea guys. But I could not find one of them. And I come out of the last pub and I thought, it's time for you to go home, Mark. And I just felt this peace. I'd never felt peace like it in my life. And I went to get on the train and I thought there was some rubbish on my seat. And I went to chuck the rubbish off, and it was a Bible tract. And it said from Corinthians, you are a new creation. The old is left behind. And I thought, wow, God, you're telling me something here. I'm not the, sharpest spiritually, but God, you're telling me that, I don't have to live this way. I can be a new creation in and through you. And that was a turning point for me.
So you're going to church, you're meeting Christians, you're pulling back, you're getting signs like something on there. What was it about Jesus that struck you?
Yeah, I mean,
you meant, you're in a culture of men. There are leaders all around you. Were there heroes for you at the time? And
yeah, what I did was, after that Leicester thing, I cut myself off. I totally moved into my mum and dad's. I just totally cut myself off. The guys at Chelsea, they thought I'd joined some cult in Bristol or something. You know, they couldn't work out. I was suddenly there 1 minute and gone the next. I mean, it wasn't done at Chelsea. So basically, it just stayed in. I just stayed in with my mum and dad. I'd get a kebab on a Saturday. It was such a change in lifestyle from the kind of party, football lifestyle to just staying in on my own. But what that made me do was, I was fascinated with my mum, and I'd gone to church for 3-4 months now, and they all seemed normal people. They had good jobs, they dressed well, they were normal, and all they kept on talking about was Jesus, that you can have this relationship with Jesus. And I'm thinking these people, because I thought all Christians were mad, but these people are on the level. They're not all mad. You know, my mum talks about Jesus. Who is this Jesus? And I thought the least I can do, I had time on my hands, I wasn't going out, I had a Bible, my reading and writing wasn't, my education wasn't good. I felt I started off with a children's Bible, but and I just got myself into the Word of God, and I asked my mum questions, but I was fascinated with this guy Jesus. You know, he never walked further than 100 miles in Israel. He was a working class carpenter. He never went to the top seminary or university at the time, yet he continued to impact lives, billions of lives. 2,000 years later, and I suddenly looked at the claims of who Jesus Christ was, and I thought, wow, Jesus has come to give life and life in abundance. He's come to set the captives free. And as someone who'd been living that way, and my heroes of that time were kind of, you know, the people I would see as kind of the freedom fighters, the people who were seeking truth, the Che Guevaras, the kind of Irish political terrorists who would have like something in their lives where they would fight to the death for, where they would want freedom, they would want truth for their people. And it fascinated me about Jesus, that Jesus didn't do it with a bullet or a gun. He done it through by going to the cross and setting people free. And I'd been searching for truth all my life. I'd been searching for meaning. And I started reading John, and it's from John chapter 18, and it's with Pontius Pilate, and Jesus says he has come to bear witness to the truth. And Pontius Pilate says, he was a governor at that time, what is truth? And he turns away mockingly and just walks away. And I thought, Mark, don't walk away, you know, from truth. If this is a truth, then investigate it. And I love that Jesus didn't just talk about truth. He said, I am the truth. He said, I am the way, I am the life. And I thought, if Jesus is saying he's the truth, and what he offered me, you know, the truth, I was searching for truth. He said he was the truth. It was about freedom. I wanted to be set free. You know, I think the Marines, they do an initiation, they train, and they've got this rucksack, and I think they have to carry, it's 28 kilos. And I just felt every day I was carrying, obviously not a physical rucksack, but I was carrying a rucksack of pain, hatred, unforgiveness, bitterness, you name it, I had it all. And I wanted freedom for that. And I saw in Jesus, as I said, my heroes of the Che Guevaras, they come for freedom. But I see Jesus was the original freedom, and he set me free. He obviously, I'm still on a journey. I'm not going to say I'm this, I'm that, because I'm still on a journey. But straight away, Jesus impacted my life, and he gave me identity as well. So all them things I'd been looking in my so-called heroes, Jesus not only gave me, but he changed it inside of me as well. That's what I loved, you know, whereas these men were kind of trying to change their society, Jesus done it from the inside. He changed my heart, whereas I hated Tottenham, West Ham. It's funny because I hated the police as well. And when I come into the church I'm going to, I said, who's the pastor of the church, Mum? She goes, he's an ex-policeman. And I thought, I don't believe it. But he became my best friend. And, you know, the Tottenham supporters who I hated, the West Ham supporters who I couldn't even be, you know, they'd hurt a couple of us, and I couldn't be near them. But God, and just the whole outworking of not just the claims of Jesus Christ, but what Jesus Christ does. As I studied other religions, it was what you had to do, whether you had to pray 5 times a day, whether you had to knock on doors, whether you had to be in touch with your inner self. But what I loved about the walk with Jesus Christ is what he had done and what he could do through you.
Have you had to pull back entirely from football since that?
I mean, God's got such a good sense of humour, because when I stopped going, Chelsea become, you know, the best team in, and like my mates come and they say, you know, Champions League, bearing in mind, I used to go to places like Grimsby and Crewe, and now they're going to Barcelona's. And so in answer to that, someone said to me when I was a very early Christian, know your boundaries, Mark. And for me, football was not about the 90 minutes of going watching Chelsea playing. It was, it was all-encompassing whatever else happened around it. And I thought I was a drug addict, and you speak to any alcoholic or drug addict, they don't want to be around. So I've been twice Chelsea in 20. I got a ban anyway years ago, so I couldn't go anyway. But then I've been twice in 20 years. I'm Chelsea through and through, but I've had to lay that, and I'm so glad I have, because guys have gone back. Just a one-off. There was a game against Cardiff a few years ago, and guys got jailed for it. There was another game, and guys who have said, "I just come out of retirement for one game." You're going to get 2-3 years for it now. Your mortgage is gone, your wife's gone. So still like Chelsea, but no, I don't go anymore.
Yeah. Just final thoughts. Presumably, life has changed in a dramatic way for you as you look back on it all that you've given up, all that's changed. Has following Jesus been worth it?
Jesus Christ is the most amazing, wonderful Saviour that there is. I tried everything. I tried to change. Believe you and me, I tried everything. But the relationship you have with Jesus Christ, to me, I wake in the morning, there's hope in my life. I was like, was it Samson? His eyes had been, gouged out, and he was just walking around, was it on a treadmill every day? He couldn't see, and he was just going round and round like that. And that was like my life. I was just living for Friday, the weekends. Now I've got a purpose in life. Shane's here tonight, my friend. Just to see someone's life change in and through Jesus Christ, to me, is the most fascinating thing. What I thought I would have to give up, I was so scared of becoming a Christian, because I just thought I'd have to sit in, it would be boring, it would be irrelevant, it would be the most boring existence ever. There is more excitement in 1 second with Jesus Christ and who he is and what he is than there is going to any nightclub, any football club, anything. So what I thought I had to give up, God has just given me through the relationship with Jesus Christ over and above.
Well, thanks very much for sharing your story. We've really enjoyed listening to you, and we're really grateful that you've joined us tonight. On behalf of us all, thanks very much. Yeah, have a seat, mate. Thanks, mate. Well done, mate. Thank you. I'd love us just for a few minutes just to reflect on some of that. I met Mark a few weeks ago, and I was fascinated, just hanging on every word as I sat in your front room and just heard it for the first time, and it's brilliant to hear it again. I'd love us just for a few minutes to reflect on what we've heard, and it'd be brilliant if you just grab a little card on the table there. I'd love us to look at a bit of the Bible for a few minutes. That I hope would help us with this. In many ways, I don't feel I have to say much off the back of what we've heard this evening. But I do just want to look at a passage of the Bible, Luke chapter 15, and I just want to think about it for 10 minutes. It's a very famous story that Jesus told. It's one that leapt out to my mind as Mark and I chatted the other week, and I'd love to read it for us. It's a story that Jesus told, and here's how it goes. Verse 11, Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Now here's a scene that Jesus tells, a story, a normal scene in one sense, a young man who leaves home to make his way in the world, different time and circumstances to Mark, a young guy, setting off to make his way in the world. Except when you think about what he leaves behind, of course, the way that he treats his dad's shoddy, as we've heard of the heartbreak of Mark and his parents. Here's a lad who treats his dad in a pretty shoddy, kind of insulting way, really, when you think about it. He says, Dad, I want the inheritance from you. What should come to me when you die? I'd like to have it now. It's the sort of thing that he's saying to his dad. And Jesus says that this young lad sets off to a far country with his dad's savings in the back pocket. He spends all of his dad's savings, we're told, in wild living. And we don't need to try too hard to imagine the wine and the women involved in all that he's doing out there. But after a while, we're told, there's a severe famine. The markets crash, the parties fade, he's left empty. And it doesn't get lower for a Jewish lad than verse 15, where he's herding the pigs and he wants to eat their breakfast. And basically, Jesus tells this story really with a loving warning to us. I think it's something that comes through Mark's story for us, which is that life without God promises so much, but it cannot deliver. Now, perhaps we're sitting here, we've heard the story this evening, we've not been reckless like the son in this story. We might listen to Mark's story and we say, well, I'm nothing like him. Being a hooligan's not everyone's cup of tea, is it? So it's not, you listen to that story, you think it's just nothing like me. And yet, there's something in Mark's story that rings true, isn't there? That we all chase something. He talked about being on the treadmill, of chasing things. For Mark, it's the next rush of the Friday night and then the Saturday, the violence that comes with that. But underneath it, as we heard, there's that search for belonging, not particularly the violence at first, just the belonging of a tribe, of a crowd, of acceptance. Well, we all know something of that in our work life or friendships or whatever. Just who's going to accept me? We all know something of that. I don't know what it is. Maybe for us it's the promotion at work. Maybe it's the acceptance in a crowd. Maybe it's the right girl or a different woman or the next online hit or whatever it is. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's just something as normal and good as making things as secure and comfortable as we can at home. A good thing. Yet somehow these things just become an ultimate thing. We push our Creator God just to the edge of our lives and then out of our lives. And Jesus is telling this story, and Mark's story this evening is just an illustration of Jesus' warning that life without God, it promises so much. And yet, says Jesus, it cannot deliver. There was a survey in America which asked this question: how much money would it take to realize the American dream? They asked loads of people that question. And those who earned $25,000 said that it would take $54,000 to achieve that. It's interesting. And those who made $100,000 believed it would mean $192,000 to realize what they wanted. In other words, apparently, contentment requires about twice as much as we currently have, however much we currently have. It's very striking. And of course, we should be able to take it from those at the top. When we hear of a Ronaldo or a Messi who has the world at his feet and yet wants a pay rise, we should be able to take it from those at the top. That if they're not satisfied, well, what hope, frankly, have the rest of us got? We could take it from Mark. He says, I've been on the treadmill, I've tried everything there is, and it doesn't satisfy. He's done everything we might have wanted to do. He's lived it for us. We could take it from him that it won't satisfy. And yet, if you're like me, I tend to think that I'll buck the trend. That I'll somehow be different. That for me, these things will satisfy. And so I set off on a life away from God. And maybe it works for a while. Maybe it works for a long while. And yet the Bible says that even if we get the whole lot, even if we get the whole monopoly board with the hotels on Mayfair, says the Bible, even then death robs us of it all. So Jesus just tells this story to lovingly warn us that life without God promises so much, and yet it cannot deliver. And Jesus warns us. He warns us that the search is futile, as Mark would say, but also actually that the behavior behind it is wrong. So here's a son who says to his father, I want the stuff, but I don't want you. And here's the sting in the tail, because as I think about this, I've wondered how I'd feel if my daughter one day grew up and said that to me, took our savings, broke off all contact. I'd be cut to the heart. See, I hate being used. I hate being ignored. I've been in meetings where I've made what I thought was a really valuable and helpful contribution, and there's been silence. And then someone said, right, let's move on. And it's been as if I've not even spoken. I'm looking around, I've got colleagues in the room who maybe think it's the meeting they're in with me. It's not. But maybe it is just me, I don't know. But maybe you know what it's like. You know what it's like when just someone ignores you. And yet here's the spin on the ball for us, because what is the difference between how this lad treats his dad and how you and I treat God, actually? Because I've got double standards on that. I hate it when I'm ignored. I've got no problem relating to God that way. I take the food and the fun and the friends and the family. I just don't want Jesus. I don't want God in my life. And now I've found that when my wife points out to me when I've done that to her, when I'm not treating her as I should, or ignoring her needs or not listening, I've found that before the things that we try, buying flowers or expensive jewelry, the first thing that's needed is to say, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have acted like that. Can you find it in your heart to forgive me? And we start again. I found that's much better. By the way, I found it's much cheaper as well. But I guess that was really the end of Mark's story, wasn't it? That he realized that when he'd done all of this, it wasn't just that he'd cut his parents out of his life, but it was how he'd related to the God who made him as well. He used that little phrase, he gave his life to Christ. And if we read the rest of this story, you can read it at home for yourself, we'd see what that meant. It was this young lad who realized how foolish and wrong he'd been to do life without his father. He turned around. He headed home, back to his father, and received a loving welcome. And Jesus very simply says to us that, in the same way that Mark turned around, that actually each one of us needs to do that. We need to turn back to God, to ask for forgiveness, to live with him as our God again before we meet him, before it's too late. And then you see, we start life again. Just as Mark did. We start life again, but now with our Heavenly Father and all of his resources to do that, to face life and death. For Mark, that was a fresh start of hope, the surprise of hope, but also the forgiveness, the dealing with guilt, all of the resources that he's needed to face life and death since then. And simply as we close, the Bible says that we know God will find it in his heart to forgive us if we turn back to him, because he sent his son Jesus to the cross. Isn't that wonderful to hear that of all of the leaders in the world that Mark had looked at, Che Guevara, all of these others, it was Jesus Christ who stood out to him as the one who would go to the cross for him. And the Bible says that God was so concerned for us in our lostness, in our running away from him, that he sent his son Jesus to the cross that we might be forgiven. Because God very much wants to offer us the hand of friendship and to bring us back into a relationship with him. So you can find the rest of this account just in one of these Luke's Gospels on the table. You might want to take it away. But we've heard plenty this evening, and just as we wrap the evening up, they're important things for us to think about. No one can force us to take that next step, but we just want to, as a church family, put on things that help people to do these things. That's why we run, you'll see on the back of this little thing called Christianity Explored. And Jack and I run this together with a bunch of others. Jack, just give us the headlines on what we do on one of these evenings, would you?
Yeah, it's a lot like this in some ways. So we meet around a table just here in the church centre. We have a meal together. Then we watch some TV on a perfect lads evening in. Then a big meal. Put the TV on, and on the TV there's someone who explains through a book of the Bible. So Mark was mentioning a book called John. There's another book called Mark, and it takes us through Jesus' life. So we watch the video, then there's discussion around the tables that we're in, and people are free to do whatever they like, whether that's to sit and listen, just take in what they're hearing, or to add to that discussion and ask questions themselves. We say at Christianity Explored, there isn't any question that you can't ask, so really for anyone who's interested. So on the 3rd of October is the sort of first of the course, if you like, but we're doing it as a taster evening. That's what we call it. So if that's something that you're interested, try it out. Just for that one go, you'll see what we do, and then you can see whether you'd like to keep doing it with us. So that's Christianity Explored, taster evening, 2 Wednesdays' time, I think, on the 3rd of October. We'd love to see you there.
There is something about men just needing the information for things. I don't know, what it is about roadmaps that we're so fascinated by. We've got to get that, or we're good at following statistics or interest rates. We just need the information in front of us. And we're just saying, and Mark was saying at some stage, you just didn't have the information in front of you of, I don't even know about the Bible. I'm starting with the children's Bible to look it through. So we just want to put the information out for anyone just to look at. That's why there are a variety of books on the table. Have a rummage around, just take some away for free. But just a way of taking a small step, just to find out more about the God and the relationship that Mark has been speaking of this evening. That's the end of our time from the front here. There's no need to rush away. Please stay. Mark will be around before he has to get on the road. So please come over, say hi, ask any question. Feel free to do that and to stay. But as we close this time, if it's okay, I may just lead us in prayer. And let's thank God for the food and pray for Mark as he goes home. So just a moment of quiet. Father, thank you for the time that we've had together. Thank you for the food and those who've prepared it. Thank you for Mark's story and all that's been helpful for us this evening. And we pray that you'd keep him and Shane as they travel back to Slough safe on the roads in the rain tonight, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Mark, again, thank you very much for being with us.